Hello and welcome to the Newly. Today we have with us Professor Disha Navani. Professor Disha Navani is the Dean at the School of Education, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. We have invited her today on the Newly platform to discuss on a very important issue. And the issue that we are discussing today is suicides, mental anxiety, and student desperation amid the coronavirus pandemic and the challenges posed by the digital divide before the Indian education system. For my friends who might not be aware of why we are discussing this issue, let me briefly put things in context. Now, we all know that recently Aishwarya Reddy, who was a second year student at Delhi's LSR College, committed suicide at her home in Telangana. Now, Aishwarya Reddy belonged to a family which was economically impoverished and socially backward. She came from a family where her father is a car mechanic and her family mortgaged their one bedroom house in Telangana to support her education. Aishwarya's sister dropped out of school so that her elder sister could study in college. Her family faced a financial crisis, and Aishwarya's demands for a laptop or a computer to be able to continue with her online education, her online classes going on in Delhi could not be met by her family. Aishwarya felt completely left out as she could not attend her online classes, and owing to the family's economic distress, her parents could not buy her a smartphone or a laptop. Aishwarya took her own life and decided to call it quits. Aishwarya's suicide note said that she felt that she was increasingly becoming a burden before her family, and she thought that it would be a good idea to quit her own life and not burden her family further. Aishwarya's story is not an isolated case of suicide. Her story reflects the apathy, the pain, the anxiety that lakhs of Indian students are facing today. And this brings to us the important question of the digital divide and how it leaves behind a section of Indian students who come from the marginalized backgrounds. Now we find ourselves at a time in the coronavirus pandemic where educational institutions have closed down. All academic activities are taking place online. Now imagine the plight of a student who's unable to do this, who does not have access to a smartphone or a laptop to be able to continue with her academic pursuits. Ever since the lockdown was announced in March, we have seen innumerable cases where students have taken their own life or have fallen prey to depression. In fact, a recent report by Oxfam India also highlights this issue. A survey conducted in the states of Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, and Uttar Pradesh said that 80% parents whose children were enrolled in government schools said that their children could not access online education. This meant that the educational institutions, the government schools, had made no attempt to reach out to their students and ensure that students who were being left out could still continue with their academic pursuits when physical spaces of the classrooms remained closed. This means that students coming from the Dalit, Muslim, and Adivasi backgrounds and female students have become increasingly more vulnerable to the educational divide. And this has erected huge walls before us. In fact, a report published by India Spent in the month of June highlights the issue that the situation is worst for female students. And this is not only a question that educationists or people working in the domain of education must think about. It is a question that we as a collective, we as a society should also reflect upon. Because when students have to quit education midway, when the dropouts increase, it also means that such students will enter the workforce at a very premature age. Female students may become vulnerable to the crisis of prostitution and human trafficking. So many girl students will be forced into early marriages, and they might never be able to continue with their educational pursuits or to come back to classrooms. So, the coronavirus pandemic is not just a healthcare crisis. It is a very, very big crisis in terms of education, and it poses innumerable challenges before the educational system in India. And I'm sure that today's conversation with Professor Disha Navani will be extremely illuminating, and she will be able to bring before us issues that many of us might not have thought about earlier. I welcome you, ma'am, once again, and thank you for having taken out the time to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The first thing that I would want to know from you, ma'am, is that how, as an educationist, do you look at the growing anxiety and suicides among students, and how far do you think that the issue of the digital divide has become a major challenge before us?
So, Ananya, thank you very much for inviting me and for laying down the context, which is very insightful and reflective. And it's very unfortunate when you hear news about girls like bright young girls like Aishwarya Reddy and many more students who commit suicide or who drop out of the system or who suffer innumerable anxieties leading to several health problems. But before getting into her problem specifically, I think it's important to understand the way our education system is structured. If you look at our education system, we have a stratified education system and we also have a stratified social fabric. So if you look at a society, there are several diversities, and we often say there's unity in diversity, but often not. There are also stratified diversities. So depending on your caste, your class, your gender, religion, ethnicity, geographic location, all that determines the school that you go to, the nature, the access to school or education, the quality of the kind, the nature of education that you get, the quality education, all that depends on where you come from. So there's a neat sync between what our policymakers have done soon after independence. If you look at both the private and the public school system, they're internally differentiated, they are heterogeneous. So you have a fancy private school, you also have a low-cost private school, which could be functioning from a garage or a basement with minimal infrastructure. If you look at public schools, also the huge diversity. You have central schools, Navodaya Vidyalaya, Vidyalaya, which are meant for a certain class of people, and you also have the bottom rung, like the municipal schools, or where children from a certain background go. So I think that's most important for us to understand first, that we've not tried to disrupt, we've not disrupted the social fabric. We, in fact, the education system feeds into the layered social fabric. And what this has done is it leads to two things. One is that students, of course, are outside of the system, so they don't get to go to school or they go to a particular kind of a school. The other is you go to a common school, you go to a common school, not a common school which Kothari Commission talks about, but you go to a common school where people with different from different backgrounds come to that school, and that unfortunately that school also it kind of reproduces social inequality. So depending on your gender, on your caste, on your class, the curriculum that you go through, the textbooks that you read, the ways in which you're assessed often reproduces social inequalities. So it is not that what you're experiencing in a school, even if you study in a mixed school, your experiences could be very different. The way you get treated, the way you understand education, so all that is very different for different people depending on where they come from. And in case of an elite institution like LSR, which is a very elite, high-profile college in Delhi, the pressures I would imagine are much more and would have been much more for a student like Aishwarya. So the pressure to conform, the pressure to not be left out, not to be the odd person out, the pressure to speak in a certain language, the pressure to look a certain way, the pressure to wear a certain kind of clothes. So all that, I think the pressures would have been much higher. But what I'm trying to say is that our education system is not an egalitarian education system at all. We have a very conveniently layered education system which feeds in to a layered kind of a society. So what the pandemic has done is aggravated all those inequalities much more, and an awareness on part of students that they belong to a certain location and the limitations that come with it.
So I think, Professor Navani, you have raised an important question and highlighted for us that the education system was never an inclusive system, and it was always full of cleavages and hierarchies, and people went to schools or institutions of learning which would fit into the social milieu that they came from. And the pandemic, what it has done is that it has accentuated those differences and erected perhaps higher walls of difference. Now,
Right.
this brings before me an important question. especially in the context of the pandemic, and that is how institutions of learning have been repeatedly failing their students, and even if we were to specifically look at Aishwarya Reddy's own case, wherein she was a recipient of a center given fellowship which she did not receive from the month of March onwards, and how the financial crisis which would have come her way became a bigger problem for her, because it left her with no way as to with which she could come back into the education system. So our education institutions also have a very important role to play as far as bringing back students into the educational fold post pandemic is concerned. So, how do you think Indian education systems, especially those belonging to the public sector, must engage in this process, and how should they engage with students and bring them back into the education fold, and especially students from families which have no access to online education? How do you think that process can take place?
See, for this, for finding a suitable solution, we must understand the causes, which are the fundamental root causes of such a system. So, if you were to look at or examine any student's education or learning, there are two spaces that a student belongs to or comes from or goes to: home and the school. Now, home is a very divergent space. So, children come from all kinds of homes and community backgrounds, and they're equipped with different kinds of social and cultural capital, economic capital, and all kinds of support from home. And there is a school which is a converging kind of an influence. Now, the schools, what they try to do, they try to treat students uniformly and give an equalizing experience to everybody. But the homes that they come from are very divergent and different. So therein, so you may think that you're being very fair, impartial, neutral by treating everyone equally, but actually you're not treating everyone equally. The very fact that you're not taking into cognizance the background of the child, or the caste and the class and the economic conditions of the child, and the kind of support that the child needs or is available at home, the fact that you're treating all children, all students equally, therein lies the very root of this inequality. So, for instance, if you look at the board exam is supposed to be a very fair, neutral, impartial kind of a system of assessing students' performance, and based on that, you get admission to various colleges or jobs or whatever, scholarships. Now, board exam, what it does is it brings children from different backgrounds, varying backgrounds, both from home and school, into a common platform. And they go through the same kind of an assessment procedure, and they're treated equally. But we know that the child will be studying in a municipal school as compared to a fancy school where all kinds of support is available both in school and at home, and you treat both of them equally. So what I'm saying is that the schools and the institutions treat all children equally, despite the fact that they come from varying backgrounds, and therein lies the roots of the inequality. So the fact that you need to be proactive, the fact that you need to reach out to students, the fact that you need to understand, be empathetic towards the concerns that a student is facing or challenges that the student is facing, all that is never really considered. And the logic is that you all get the same treatment, so what's the big fuss about?
Right. So I think you've made a very important point here. I think a lot has already been said about why the digital divide is leading to leaving behind a lot of students from the marginalized backgrounds. But what we talk about very less is what these students go through in their own internal spaces. Like, for example, when you mentioned about Aishwarya, you said that when we look at the issue from the outside, it only looks like an issue wherein she could not have an access to gadgets, and that's why she committed suicide. The problem was only about accessing.
It's a personal problem, yeah.
Yeah, we make it sound like her own personal problem, like a biographical problem. But I think what you are trying to say is that it's not just the problem of having access to finances to be able to buy a certain gadget or to have access to internet. We also have to look at issues about how a certain class of people are made to feel in certain kinds of institutions, for example. Or for example, how the lack of space, physical spaces, which are conducive to all kinds of students, are becoming increasingly difficult to access, and how these are increasing anxiety and tension among students. Like, for example, when you mentioned about Aishwarya, you said that she would have necessarily felt the pressure of dressing up or speaking in a certain way so as to be able to match with her peers. But that also must have added to her own tensions and pressures. And this points towards how our own education system is becoming more and more aggressive, it's becoming competitive, and it's trying to judge people coming from different milieus on the same parameters. Like it is made to appear as if the educational race or the assessment system is equal for all, but it actually isn't. And when we treat all students equally, we have to also understand all of them come from different societal, economic, cultural backgrounds. They all have different cultural capitals. So I would like you to highlight this issue a little more, because I think this is something which we talk about very less.
So when you look at the online system, see, and then I also have an issue with looking at the online versus the traditional face-to-face as bipolar opposites. I agree that there are lots of merits in a traditional classroom, and there are huge limitations in an online kind of a setup. But there are certain elements, for instance, which could be common to both in terms of either in the way they handle, depending on the way they handle, good or bad. So, for instance, the way you understand learning, the engagement of students with the constructive knowledge, the agency of teachers, students, the teacher-student ratio, and all that. So, I don't look at them as bipolar opposites. However, I believe that the traditional classroom also had huge problems. There's questions of diversities and inequalities getting into the classroom and getting further reproduced is always there. I mean, our textbooks have always done this damage. They from a certain community in a certain manner. You get assessed for dressing up in a certain manner, for a certain diction that you have, for a pleasing personality that you have. These are all problematic. Now, the online definitely it's kind of aggravated the problems. It's become much more aware of the social inequalities. And it's also, I believe, it's got condensed in a no quick time. So the pressure is much more, you're more aware of that. So, for instance, all this has been talked about, the fact that you may not have a gadget like a laptop or a phone or internet connectivity or the money to buy all that. But on the other hand, there are three other things which I'd like to talk about. One is the sense of space. Everyone assumes, like in our case, also I teach in a university, people assume that you have a lot of physical space at home. If everyone is going online, then there are challenges to what you can hear, what you can say. So one is that problem. And we're competing for physical space. So within the family also, if everyone is going online, you're actually competing with each other to find a certain spot where you may get internet or to talk or to be heard without disturbance. Secondly, which I think is more important in Aishwarya's case, probably you're also living with your family. So you experience their struggle, a day-to-day struggle, the fact that they mortgaged their house, they taken a loan, the younger sister had dropped out of school. So all that also, if she'd been in the hostel, perhaps she would have been physically at least kept away from all that. That also you're beginning to experience on a day-to-day, very real basis, where you start feeling guilty that you're the cause for their misery and all that. Second is the sense of anonymity, I think, which gets aggravated in an online classroom. So in a traditional classroom also, it's quite possible the teacher may ignore you. She may not look at you, she may not talk to you, she may not answer your question, she may not allow you to speak. But it's quite possible that a sensitive teacher or a democratic teacher may actually engage with you, give you the chance, encourage you to talk, ensure that you participate in the conversations. But in an online mode, you're really mute. You're mute to the world. You mute yourself, the audio, video both get muted. And the sense of anonymity increases manyfold. You're really anonymous. The third is that the sense, when you're studying in a college, for instance, or a traditional face-to-face classroom, your peers are there to support you. So someone or the other you might find to be able to relate to, but here at home, you're all alone. So that peer support or community support, which you require at a certain age when you're more sensitive, I think all that gets lost and taken away from us. So people face many more problems. So what I'm saying is that it's not that students have had a great experience in our schools. Students from backgrounds which are marginalized, disadvantaged, they've always suffered, I think. Our school system have always been unfair to them. But now the problems have got amplified and become more severe in the nature and even fatal to that extent.
Thank you, Professor Navani. I think the point that you made about how certain sections of students have been repeatedly left behind, and these are students who have felt anxious attending our schools because a sense of being left out continuously accompanied them. And this is not something which is a new crisis faced by the education system, but the pandemic has only accentuated this problem and underlined it once again for us. That is what you're saying. I would also want to deviate a bit from here and from Aishwarya's case, and ask you, how do you see this becoming a major challenge also for women students? Because women and girls who are enrolled into education systems, educational institutions, and are presently having to attend online classes, or for example teaching somewhere, or are employed somewhere, they are facing an additional problem, because they are also having to deal with domestic chores and also fulfill their professional responsibilities. So I also think that this is something which we have reflected upon very less. So could you also share for our viewers how women professionals and how they are looking at the pandemic, and how they are coping up with the new realities wherein the workspace and the domestic space are increasingly merging, and they are faced with an additional challenge of taking care of the household as well as keeping up with their professional responsibilities?
The women are definitely getting a raw deal. They always had a raw deal, and now even more so perhaps now, because like you said, the space of home and school is all merging into one. So the pressures on a woman, and often women don't get second chance. So if you, for instance, sometime back, I remember we were discussing the non-detention policy, and we were saying how it's meant to reduce the dropouts and to ensure that children stay back in school. And a school teacher who was sitting next to me, my colleague, who was part of the panel discussion, he said it's worse for the women. And I really hadn't thought about that. He said that actually women don't get a second chance. If we fail once, we're out of the system. The same goes now. So what I'm saying repeatedly, I repeat myself, Ananya, that we've had an unequal education system. We're living in spaces outside school which are unequal. And school also, we experience those inequalities on a day-to-day basis. Discrimination, not just open, but also subtle, like I said, through textbooks, through pedagogic interaction with teachers, through the assessment processes. So now, whichever category you belong to, which is sort of marginalized or disadvantaged in some manner, their problems and challenges get amplified much more. Of choice, for instance, there's limited money. Who will you send to school or a better school? The choice is obvious. So these things are have always been there. It's not that they maybe some new problems have got added, like emotional, psychological stresses are much more now, and this feeling of alienation, rejection, not being able to live a normal life. But some problems have always existed, and they've got kind of got amplified, whereas new ones have got added to those existing problems. For children, students who come from certain backgrounds, homes were not necessarily happy spaces where there's enough space, physical, psychological, social, there's struggles of all kinds, there's challenges of all kinds. So there's students who want to actually run away from home also, because they feel that school or the institute, like a college, gives them that kind of freedom, or that, to run away from home, which is a very full of misery or struggles or challenges. Or so that also I think we need to be taken into account.
So I think you've made extremely important points that many of us might not have thought about or reflected on earlier. And something which is very important, which emerged out of our own conversation, was that it's wrong to think that the pandemic has introduced inequalities into the education system. No, inequalities and hierarchies were always present, and the education system has been plagued by differentiations and walls of separations. People have always been able to access institutions which their own societal and economic milieus allowed them to access, and it was never an egalitarian equal space. But what the pandemic has done is that it has highlighted and accentuated these hierarchies and pushed people who were always isolated further into the margins, and it has robbed from them the very, very important and life affirming opportunity of accessing an education and doing something positive with their own lives. And because of this, lakhs of Indian students and millions of students worldwide will never be able to come back to educational or into classrooms. And this is something which not only educationists but people in general must reflect on, because this affects each one of our lives. And Professor Navani has made extremely important observations in this regard, and she has put before us critical questions that we all must think about. I thank you, Professor Navani, for having taken out the time to speak to us today. And it's always wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.